So guys, what you're seeing is a change in patterns, and if you look around, this is one of the first articles I'm going to pull up, is it's going to talk about how nightclubs are basically going through a crisis, especially in the West. Nightclubs are and they're going through it, and I'll use this article to kind of illustrate it. Okay, so Britain has 20% fewer nightclubs than it had when the country first went into lockdown. Now that seems like it's an immediate problem, right? But here you can see right here, nightclubs have been in decline for the last 15 years or so. Now you know what that coincides with. Coincides with online dating. But look at what has happened to nightclubs in Britain. This is nightclubs, England, Scotland, and Wales. From a peak before basically the iPhone until now, and you can see that basically the pandemic is basically finishing off nightclubs. And this is for Australia, for England, but I want to also show you, this is a video talking about the same problem that's happening in Australia.
The reason the club's been closed this year is due to a lack of staff. But Stuart Birchall, who's run the place for 6 years, says people are also just less interested in going clubbing.
So over the last 10 to 15 years, nightclubs in general have been in decline. I read a report last week that there was 59 in WA, now it's down to 37. Obviously the pandemic's had something to do with that. The people not being able to trade, they've obviously gone out of business. But across the country we've seen that.
Okay, so he might be actually referring to the article that we were just looking at here, which is from the BBC, right? Because this is an article, it's actually from August the 2nd, so this is about 3 months old. But it's for nightclubs, they're in a crisis, and this crisis has been prolonged for a 10 to 15 year period. But they're going to explain all of that in this article, in this video.
It's a global trend. Nightclubs shutting their doors as younger generations opt for small bars and festivals instead. In the United Kingdom, the number of nightclubs has more than halved in the last 15 years. In Australia, industry data shows a gradual decline over the past decade, accelerated.
Yeah, I want to keep that up there so you guys can see that. This is what's happening in Australia, right? Like, yeah, the nightclub industry is, you're seeing precipitous drops across the West, right?
By the COVID-19 pandemic, with more than 100 venues closing over the past 2 years and shrinking profits for those that remain.
A much more diverse range of social options for young people now. Back in the 80s and 90s, nightclubs were probably the most exciting game in town until the casino came to town.
Well, you wouldn't say the casinos for America, but what you would say is that definitely for Gen Xers, we may have been the last generation to actually use the club as a dating and mating space, because once we finished school and we started using smartphones, that was over. And you saw that it kind of peaked, but they're gonna cover all of this, so I'll let them do it.
There's small bars, there's all manner of different festivals and other options.
In the Victorian city of Geelong, Mario Gregorio has been running nightclubs for 20 years and says it's become a challenging business model.
Liquor licence fees have increased dramatically by 300% to 400% over the last 10 years. Also, music licence fees have increased dramatically as well.
Okay, so he's talking about the fees in terms of just the cost of running the nightclub, and I think it is what it is, but all things considered, 20 years ago, it still cost money to run a nightclub. 15 years ago, it still cost money. In the 1980s, it still cost money. So the cost of how much it costs to run the nightclub can't be the primary issue, because nightclubs have always been located inside of cities where there are a lot of people gathering and the rent spaces were high. And so there's certainly something else at play.
The gap is quite small in margins, but not like it used to be, that's for sure.
He says nightclubs will have to adapt to stay relevant.
Probably the most popular club in Geelong is actually a pub, which has a massive beer garden. So people like to dress down now and have a bit more of a relaxed atmosphere. Festivals are also popular, and online dating services are popular as well. So people
And
can.
there it is. That is the game changer, right? So what is online dating? Online dating is how tall are you? How good do you look? How tall are you? How good do you look? If you don't pass that bar, then even for the average female on the other side who's doing the swiping, you don't have a chance. So it's almost been 20 years since online dating has had an effect on mating and dating. And clearly, if you're not one of the guys that can pass the litmus test of being tall enough and good looking enough, then you've basically been quote unquote missing out on dating for the last 10, 15 years. Even, if you're doing well-to-do, you still have to cross the initial hurdle if you're doing online dating or clubbing, where you need to be at least a certain level of looks. But at least before online dating, clubbing, you had an option because people just did not have the reach that they have now. But now with the reach people have with their smartphones, that women have the option to be much more picky. And so I think that there's much less incentive for non-select guys, guys lower in the totem pole to go to clubs and spend money. So remember this article, remember how much burn this article got, what's behind the rise of lonely single men? This was almost kind of I don't know, it was like I wouldn't say a celebration, but it was a big deal in the summer. There are a lot of people making TikToks and all kinds of things about this. And I think to a certain extent, they got it right in terms of men, being lonely and whatnot. But I think it's closer to just most average men, at least in the West, in America, don't have the options. If you're a 5'7", 5'8" guy and you're medium, decent, good looking, you can't date your counterpart. You just can't do it. She's trying to date someone's 2-3 notches above you. So you're trying to date someone at least at your level or down, and that person is looking past you too. And so what has happened is basically, the market has changed quite a bit, right? So with that said, I want to actually kind of interject a little bit of a joke here, but I think this TikTok kind of segues into what I think the biggest adaptation has been. So this is a guy who actually has a girlfriend, but I think it's still relevant. She says, when you get into a fight with your fiance and wait for him to chase after you apologize. And I'll let you guys hear it. So that's clearly the sound of a PlayStation coming on, right? And I think that has been the biggest adaptation. I think that's been the biggest adjustment. The biggest adjustment. So you could look at, I want to show you Matthew Hussey's channel. He's like one of the top dating coaches, right? So you can see he's getting a lot of, anytime you get 90,000 views on a video, that's a success, right? He's getting 45,000. He's getting tons of views on his videos, right? You got one view, you got 167,000 views. The dangerous high value guy you should avoid, but I wouldn't be surprised if a good number of these views are women. Now, I want to transition this against, and I don't know anything about video games, nothing. But these are clearly adult video games, and look at the kind of views. 71,000 views for a walkthrough in 15 hours. 29,000 views in a 24-hour period. Now this contrasts with what we're seeing on the other video, and like I said, those are probably a lot of women. Now you can also say that, and this is a random YouTuber, I don't know any gamer because I don't really have time to game, but this is like one of the random YouTube gaming channels. There are so many. there are YouTuber gamers with 100,000 followers, 70,000 subscribers, or 70 million subscribers, like tens of millions of subscribers. And look at all of these videos with 6-digit views, 50,000 views. Clearly, there's been a shift in interest for young men into video games. And the video games are getting much more advanced. If you look at these thumbnails, these don't even look like video games. They look real. And so I'm going to show you this article. This is an article talking about the number of people that are playing video games. What are the numbers for people who play video games? Look at this number for America. 20 million Americans play video games in America alone. 65% of American adults. Now, I don't have time for playing video games, and I think a lot of older Americans don't. But once you start getting down into the Gen Zs and the millennials, they're playing video. I know Gen Xs that play video games, but they're playing a lot of video games. And so for guys that don't have the availability of women, there's video games. And thus I say revenge of the nerds. Guys are adjusting. If you are a guy who basically are non-select, you're non-select, you can't get a girlfriend. This is a guy with a girlfriend, but you're non-select, you can't get a girlfriend. You order out and you play video games. You're playing video games. You're like, the games that these guys have to play now are on a different level, and we have seen men adjust. This is how men are adjusting. That whole thing about men not having the social skills, that's bunk. That is not it. This article was bunk. This is not it. Young dudes are shrinking their lives. They're not going to bars. Dudes that are non-select, they're not trying to pick up girls. They're just doing their thing. I guess they're doing their OnlyFans, if you will. They're liking people on, I don't know, Instagram or whatever. And they're playing their video games, and they're going to their jobs, and that's the way they're doing it. And I'm not sure what that's going to mean for the future, but it can't bode well for a generation of single women who are going to get into their 30s and they're going to start freaking out about marriage and all of that. But that's the landscape. And thus revenge of the nerds, because men have a lot of power in this situation. Maybe they have all of it, because all young dudes have to do is keep playing games and not getting married. What is the incentive? The incentive for a man to get married now is about as low as it's ever been. A guy now, you can work your job, go home, play video games, order out, see your guy friends, play video games on the internet, get together, drink beer, play video games, watch sports. And while you playing around on Tinder, or someone matches, you match with them. If they don't, so be it. And I think that's the way a whole generation of guys are playing the game. And when guys are playing the game with a way where they don't care if they win or lose, the loser to this one, women gonna lose this one. Thus, the nerds are having their revenge. With that, guys, thank you guys for watching the video. Please like, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys on the other side about this one. Take care, guys.